In late 1950s Soviet Russia, the state managed almost every aspect of daily life, but deep in the wilderness, citizens could still access a rare kind of isolation. Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old engineering student, organized a winter expedition. He and his 8 companions were highly trained survivalists. They built their own radios, tested their own gear, and knew exactly how to navigate the freezing backcountry. Their route took them toward a remote peak in the northern Ural Mountains. The indigenous Mansi people called it Kolat-Syak, the Mountain of the Dead. These hikers spent years training to evaluate environmental risks and respond with technical precision. Their deaths represent a failure of professional judgment that cannot be explained by simple environmental exposure. Weeks after they missed their check-in, a search party found their campsite. The heavy canvas tent was collapsed and buried in snow. Inside, the team's boots, heavy coats, and supplies were neatly arranged. But the side of the tent had been sliced open from the inside. Leading away from that slash were 9 sets of footprints. They walked out into sub-zero temperatures wearing only socks or entirely barefoot. Investigators followed those tracks to a forest edge nearly a mile away. Under a large cedar tree, they found the first 2 bodies. The hikers had managed to build a small fire. Their hands were severely burned, and the branches of the tree above them were snapped off, as if they had been frantically climbing it. The remaining bodies were discovered months later, buried deep under the snow. Their injuries defied logic. Several had crushed ribs and fractured skulls, impacts equivalent to a high-speed car crash. Yet the skin on their torsos showed no bruising, and there was 0 external tissue damage. Autopsies revealed even stranger anomalies. One victim was missing her tongue, and another was missing his eyes. Finally, Geiger counters detected localized radioactive contamination on specific pieces of their clothing. The official finding of a compelling natural force ignores the specific mechanical and chemical evidence left on the slope. One mechanical theory proposes a sudden slab avalanche. A slab avalanche is a cohesive plate of snow that breaks away from the surrounding snowpack and slides down a slope as a single unit. If one struck the tent in the middle of the night, it instantly buries the hikers. Being crushed under a massive weight of snow explains the immediate terror. If the entrance was blocked, cutting their way out of the side and sprinting into the dark without gear would be a logical, desperate attempt to survive. This diagram compares the necessary debris field of a slab avalanche with the actual layout of the campsite. Notice the red zone where the snow must heavily displace. Now look at the blue markers indicating the victim's footprints. The tracks started right next to the tent and remained perfectly preserved on the surface of the snow. A sliding wall of ice would have obliterated them. A blunt mechanical force, like an avalanche, cannot selectively crush human ribs, while leaving delicate, shallow footprints completely intact on the surface directly below it. Another theory points to a covert military experiment. Several local witnesses reported seeing glowing orange lights in the sky that night, and a classified aerial detonation could explain the specific radioactive isotopes found on the hikers' clothing. This graphic illustrates the physics of an aerial concussive shockwave. A high-altitude blast creates an invisible wave of pressure that passes entirely through a human body. It violently compresses the internal organs and snaps the ribs from the inside, leaving the outer epidermal layer, the skin, completely undisturbed. But a massive blast does not fit the timeline of the evidence. Victims suffering from pulverized internal organs would not have the physical capacity to walk a mile into the forest and systematically gather wood to build a campfire. A classified weapon test explains the radiation and the internal trauma, but it fails to account for the victim's sustained survival behaviors post-impact or the targeted removal of soft tissues. If we rule out mechanical force and military explosives, we have to look at environmental acoustics. The specific dome-like shape of Kolat-Syak naturally forces wind to accelerate over its peak, effectively turning the mountain into a massive wind tunnel. This diagram shows an aerodynamic phenomenon called a Kármán vortex street. A Kármán vortex street is a repeating pattern of swirling vortices caused by the unsteady separation of flow of a fluid, like wind, around blunt bodies. Here, high-speed wind strikes the mountain and splits into alternating waves of low-frequency sound. These specific low-frequency waves hit 7 Hz, a range of sound known as infrasound. Infrasound refers to sound waves with frequencies below the lower limit of human audibility, which is typically 20 Hz. When exposed to 7 Hz, the frequencies bypass our conscious hearing and directly vibrate internal organs, inducing severe respiratory distress and spontaneous, uncontrollable panic. Infrasound provides a scientific basis for the sheer terror required to slash a tent open and sprint into the freezing dark without shoes. But sound waves cannot shatter skulls or inflict the crushing physical injuries found on the bodies buried in the snow. Testing the evidence reveals a breakdown of the standard scientific models. No single explanation, whether mechanical, military, or acoustic, can simultaneously account for all the physical data points recorded on that mountain. The hikers reached the forest edge, built a fire, and climbed the cedar tree with enough urgency to snap the branches. From that height, they spent their final moments monitoring the campsite they had just abandoned. The Dyatlov Pass Incident remains a forensic anomaly because the physical evidence contradicts itself. It is a reminder that in extreme environments, variables can align in ways that leave behind a record, but no possible solution.